We can move on to news around the world.
Hello from Canada. I actually have some positive news to report out of Canada this week for a change. On October 31st, the province of Alberta officially introduced the Education Amendment Act and the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act. Both bills passed their first reading. This is a very promising first step in protecting children from the harms of gender ideology and ensuring that women and girls are able to participate in sport without added danger or unfairness in Alberta. There's still a way to go on these bills, but the fact that they passed their first reading is certainly something to celebrate. Canadian women joined the worldwide protest against self-ID coming into effect in Germany on Friday. A group of women attended the German embassy in Ottawa and held a peaceful protest. Thankfully, there were no counter-protesters. There was also a protest held in Montreal, a small protest at the German consulate in Toronto, and several women wrote letters to the German embassy, and some were delivered in person. Statistics Canada has just released up-to-date data that confirms what we know to be true with respect to victims of prostitution and trafficking in Canada. They have stated that human trafficking is a gendered crime, with most detected victims being women and girls, and the majority of the perpetrators being men and boys. They also stated that human trafficking most often involves sexual exploitation and forced labor. Of the 3,223 women and girls who were victims of human trafficking, 68% were aged 24 and younger. Victims were most often trafficked by an intimate partner, 34%, or a casual acquaintance, 22%. I found this next quote to be particularly heartbreaking. A tactic employed by some traffickers involves drawing a potential victim into a romantic relationship with promises of love and affection, with the end goal of exploitation. In other Canadian news, Adam Leboucan, who has renamed himself Terra de Sousa, has requested a temporary leave from the women's prison he is incarcerated in to attend an Indigenous ceremony. Leboucan is in prison for raping a 10-month-old baby so severely that the baby had to be airlifted to a Vancouver hospital. He also admits to having drowned a toddler in his youth. Leboucan decided to begin identifying as a woman after he went to prison. He was then moved to a prison with a mother and baby unit, where multiple women have reported him leering at their babies. Leboucan has applied and been denied temporary leave several times in the past. We do not yet know whether he will be granted leave to attend this ceremony or not. CTV reported on this issue, referring to Leboucan as she throughout the article. And that's all I have from Canada this week.
Greetings, sister. It's Carrie from the US. The most exciting actions this week by far were the historic November 1st protests organized in solidarity with German women on the day Germany's draconian self-ID law went into effect. I'm pleased to report that feminists in multiple US cities answered our sisters' call to rise up and bring our collective outrage over such misguided and harmful public policy directly to German embassies and consulates across the country. Participating US cities included Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, Portland, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C., and perhaps others that I've missed. While US women were for the most part allowed to conduct their protests peacefully and without resistance from TRA or Antifa factions, at least one participant alluded to attempted police intervention, and others mentioned officials challenging the validity of the permits they had obtained for what is supposed to be constitutionally protected activity. For anyone interested, Kara published an encouraging piece on her Substack titled, "What an Amazing Time to Fight for Women and Girls and the Material Reality of Sex," which provides a brief summary of the day's events. On a personal note, while I had every intention of attending the Chicago action and contributed to its planning under the direction of lead organizer Brianna Presley, WDI USA state contact for Illinois, a back injury that's been slow to resolve forced me to withdraw from doing so. I worked from home instead, promoting content from Chicago and other US actions on social media. A worthy task for sure, though it saddens me that I wasn't able to join my sisters on the ground for such an impactful and globally significant event. Last week, I mentioned the New York Times article, which revealed that influential gender zealot Johanna Olsen Kennedy withheld publications of the results of a 2-year federally funded study on the effects of puberty blockers on the mental health of minors after the results proved to be politically inconvenient. Following up on that story, this week Bernard Lane notes that congressional Republicans plan to launch an investigation into the withholding of the puberty blocker data. Additionally, he writes that Republican Senator Marco Rubio has urged an investigation by the funding body itself and also asked the NIH to clarify the mental health of the children before puberty suppression, given the contradictory claims by Dr. Olsen Kennedy. Next, I have 2 sports-related news items to cover. The first is in relation to Algerian boxer Imane Khalif, the man the IOC allowed to not only seize a gold medal in women's boxing at the 2024 Paris Olympics, but to violently abuse women on a global stage. A detailed medical report by expert endocrinologists from hospitals in Paris and Algiers, drafted in June of 2023, and recently obtained by a French journalist, confirmed that Khalif is impacted by 5-alpha reductase deficiency, a DSD found only in males, has XY chromosomes, internal testicles, a micropenis, and male typical testosterone levels. As our chief of staff, Kristen, wrote in her Substack post on the topic, these developments expose an uncomfortable truth. They knew he was male, yet the IOC and the Algerian committee allowed him to compete against women anyway, rather than acknowledge him as a man with a genetic abnormality, a reality that would challenge standards of masculinity. These organizations decided to push him into women's sports, forcing women to bear the burden. The other item involves new developments in the ongoing SJSU women's volleyball saga. SJSU is the team that includes male athlete Blair Fleming on its roster. Thus far, that inclusion has resulted in 5 teams in the Mountain West Conference opting to forfeit their scheduled matches with SJSU rather than compete against him. As reported by the online magazine Quillette, on October 29th, Melissa Beatty-Smooth, associate head coach of the SJSU volleyball team, filed a scathing 33-page Title IX complaint with officials at SJSU, the Mountain West Conference, and the NCAA, which details how her school's aggressively enforced transgender inclusion policy created a toxic environment for female athletes. One of the more unsettling allegations in the filing was that Fleming had conspired with an opponent to help San Jose State lose a match and attempt to injure teammate Brooke Slusser. Brooke, you may recall, was the first and only, I do believe, SJSU player to publicly voice opposition to Fleming's inclusion on her team, and who last month joined 16 other female athletes in suing the NCAA for Title IX violations. Mere days after Beatty-Smooth filed her complaint, SJSU responded by suspending the coach indefinitely, effective immediately, on Saturday, November 2nd, just 90 minutes before a scheduled match against New Mexico. That SJSU suspended the coach, whose only intention was to protect women's sports and protect team members, is outrageous and quite possibly illegal. We'll have to see how this plays out, but for now, Beatty-Smooth is evaluating all her options. And finally, on November 3rd, WDI USA published a statement in support of the University of Nevada, Reno women's volleyball team, who were the 5th team to forfeit their match against SJSU and who had the ovaries to join Riley Gaines and Icons at a standing room only rally at the Reno Sparks Convention Center on the day the match was scheduled. The Post cites Article 7 of the Declaration and commends these young women for taking a principled stand for fairness in women's sports. And that's all I have today. Thank you.